Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Today I have a special guest that I wanted to have for quite a while, Michael from Star Wars Explored. Mike, it's so good to have you. Before you introduce yourself, guys, our general topic of discussion today will be cross-generational and personal influence of Star Wars media on both of us and the fandom in general, and how two fans of two different generations perceive it. Mike, thank you so much for making it. Please introduce yourself. Tell us where fans can find all of your channels.
All right. Well, thank you for the wonderful opportunity to talk. I'm Mike from a little channel called Star Wars Explored, where me and a group of friends basically just talk about whatever interests us in the world of Star Wars. We're doing Legends and canon book reviews and discussions, going over some of the content from the Clone Wars and the new Lego game, which I didn't like very much. We just basically cover a little bit of everything. So yeah, if you want to follow us, then hit up Star Wars Explored on YouTube and SW Explored on Twitter.
Yeah. Awesome, Mike. Yeah, you and I, we started interacting where I just started my channel. I believe you were doing it quite there before me, and a couple of your friends, you introduced me, and we kind of like live streamed a couple of times. And I really enjoyed your thoughts and ideas. Mike, just in a couple of words, tell me, where's your love from Star Wars come from? What is your earliest, happiest memory with Star Wars?
That's a very interesting question, because I don't remember much of my childhood. The earliest memory that I have of Star Wars, because I don't think I'd be able to pick a favorite. The earliest memory I have is being a few years old, laying on my grandma's yellow carpet in her bedroom, playing with action figures of Luke and Vader, watching their duel in Empire Strikes Back. That's the earliest memory I have. So by the age of a couple years old, I was already a pretty big Star Wars fan, apparently.
Yeah.
And from there all the way until now, I've had a kind of unstable relationship with Star Wars. Our connection has kind of faded and grown back as they release content.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting. You know, for me, I'm originally from Russia. We didn't have access to Star Wars action figures. We did have like G.I. Joes, Ninja Turtles, so Western influence was already there. But at least speaking for my small town, we just did not have action figurines. And for me, it was my dad introducing us to the films through buying us our very own VHS recorder. And he brought all three original films on tape. And that's how we saw it. But I didn't even imagine there were figures or toys like that. I was like, oh man, that's lucky for you guys. But Mike, to jump into it, I wanted us to start for the first part of the podcast talking about how just you and I sitting there and discussing and how we both understand the cultural phenomenon of Star Wars. You know, we come, like as I mentioned earlier, from two different generations, and there's a generation of fans before us, right, who saw it originally in 1977, were like in their 60s and so, and there were young men and women, or maybe perhaps kids, who saw it, and a lot of people mention it in the car lots with their parents who introduced them to Star Wars. And we all, as different generations of fans, we share different experiences. So what do you think Star Wars means to fans and to pop culture in general?
That's a very deep question, because I think as time has gone by, the meaning of Star Wars to people has kind of changed, at least in the general consensus. It's always hard to tell, because there's always that vocal minority who feel like the majority all the time. I would like to think, and maybe it's just wishful thinking, I don't know, because there's a lot of people who don't like the sequels or prequels. But I would like to think overall, people throughout the ages, I make that sound like Star Wars has been around for millennia, throughout the 4 decades that it's been around, which is certainly a long time in the world of film.
Right.
I think that the different movies, the different trilogies, and even maybe the anthologies have brought in many different fans of many different backgrounds, like you and me. And I would like to think that each of the movies that have been carefully crafted by really just people who are capable of producing masterpieces, whether they were able to do that with Star Wars or in other movies that they've worked on, geniuses in their fields have come together to work on Star Wars. And I would like to think each individual movie or TV episode has been able to give someone the same sense of feeling that some other Star Wars fan 30 years prior or 30 years in the future has also felt. Even though the tides of culture are constantly changing, I would like to believe, even if it's a fool's errand, that Star Wars overall has had the same impact on some level to someone throughout its many generations.
Right. And I always that's a very good, very kind of like complete set of ideas. You kind of like shaped a general idea like this is what it is to fans. It's obviously speaks to the fact that you think about this stuff a lot, right? All of us do. We're like, I'm personally a nerd. I think about Star Wars every time. From the time I go to bed, the time like I wake up throughout the whole day, it's Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, right? When I was a kid, to me it was just something that I shared with my boys in the streets. Movies we like. Next to movies like Indiana Jones, next to movies like Back to the Future and RoboCop and Terminator and Aliens, just things we loved. It was never on the highest pedestal, on the lowest pedestal. It's just things that we all adored. As I grew older, I came to the United States. I was a teenager and I experienced prequels and I started getting into the books and comics and kind of got the larger picture and understanding, also learning about the American culture, the American society, the pop culture, sometimes, worshiping of the actors, kind of like celebrity statuses, which was all new to me. It was like, oh, okay, interesting. That's weird. Hollywood, like the whole aspect of actors and directors living and interacting there and how that part of the country is perceived, where all these creatives come from. So I understood it as American modern folktale. American myth, because the United States, as far as a nation goes, it's a nation of immigrants who came to this land and who created this melting pot of ideas, of influences, of traditions that they brought from across the sea, right? And when you speak to what is American folklore, what is American culture, a lot of artists and a lot of experts in the field say, well, the banjo guitar is a staple of the American folklore. Western films, an invention entirely made by Hollywood, which other filmmakers around the world were influenced by, like Akira Kurosawa. He loved Westerns, right? That is also a part of American folklore. And to me, this is what Star Wars is. It's a part of the American folklore. It's a modern myth. But what does it mean to you personally?
Well, I will cover that in just a second, but I would like to touch a little bit on what you said. I think
Sure.
You put that beautifully. But I think that Star Wars, because of the fact that George Lucas was influenced by many different cultures, many different pieces of history,
Right.
Because it becomes such a staple in America in general, like there's very few people nowadays who haven't heard of Star Wars somehow, and for a lot of people, I mean, we're talking billions of sales in total when it comes to Star Wars, like barely anyone on this planet hasn't heard of it in some way.
Right.
All of the different cultures and pieces of history that influenced George Lucas's creation of Star Wars have now been ingrained in a way into America, but more across the world. Here, I would have never thought that Japanese animation would play such an integral role into my life. But the groundwork was there all the way when I was 2 years old watching Star Wars, because in some way, shape, or form, Japan and its history made a huge, and its amazing filmmakers like Kurosawa played a huge influence in the creation of Star Wars. And George Lucas was able to take many different pieces of culture, history, and even politics to an extent, and craft something so beautiful and so impactful that even to this day, people like you and me are talking about it, and we're still influenced by all those tiny little elements.
Yeah. Well said, man. Next, I'll ask the most obvious question in order to continue just my train of thought, what I want to lead our conversation into. Is Star Wars art?
Star Wars is the most interesting form of art, because every time a new movie is made, it's attacked with a new set of ideas from the creator, George Lucas, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, whoever. And all of those people have their own definition of what Star Wars is, even to an extent. George Lucas, a couple years between making each movie, would change his opinion of what Star Wars should be. He would mold the new film and steer it in a direction different than the other film may have taken the franchise. So I think Star Wars is a wonderful, perhaps the most wonderful form of art, because it's become such a giant in everything, not just in terms of branding, but movies in general have entirely changed the way that they're made because of Star Wars, whether that be because of the technology, whether it's the filmmaking techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So every single person who works on it, whether it be a concept artist whose one sketch made it into the movie, everyone has played some role in changing each individual movie or each individual TV show or season or whatever, or even a book or novel. Um, they've imparted their version of Star Wars and their ideas and how they think and feel into those pieces of work. And
they're all contributors.
Exactly, absolutely. They're all contributors to what we consider to be Star Wars. And Star Wars to you and me and someone else may be something entirely different, but generally speaking, unless it's a Star Trek fan maybe, they will generally consider something from Star Wars to be art or to be cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. You know, and Star Wars is not unique in that, you know, the famous video game franchise Final Fantasy, right? Its creator, Hironobu Sakugachi, always talked about how with each game he wanted to innovate and refresh the formula. And obviously in its early inception, it was limited by hardware. But as the hardware developed and they were only limited by the imagination, he always wanted to twist the formula, to push it, to try to steampunk, to try more experimental, more grounded, realistic approach, epic fantasy, which was influenced by Dungeons and Dragons, or another popular, you mentioned anime, Hakuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star. Not many people realize it. It is one of the most successful franchises in the world. I believe its net worth is close to 20 or 30 billion dollars, like something like that. It's humongous, right? And over the years, it transformed, and obviously beyond the original creator, other more modern OVA series took their own spin and their approach to it. So yeah, I would agree with my own statement and very much say that Star Wars is art indeed. But what is the function of art in society?
Oh, man, come with the deep philosophical questions.
Welcome to Star Wars Timeline.
Well, I wasn't prepared to answer that question, so I'll just give kind of a general answer to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
I think that art in general is something that exists to help humanity exist, right? Throughout our time on Earth as humans, art has always meant something different from, you know, one age to another, or one person to another even,
right.
Living within the same technological age. I think art exists, whether it be a movie, whether it be a comic, whether it be literally a piece of art. I think it exists to give man meaning, or at least help them find their meaning. Because without Star Wars, we wouldn't be here right now. Our lives would be completely different. You know, our current existences would be entirely different if it wasn't for just this one individual piece of art. So I think that it plays a hugely significant role in how we as humans develop. But even from one person to another, I know, I'm not going to share too many details, but my friend Seamus, who is now part of Star Wars Explored, he had a very bad time at the end of 2020 where his whole family had COVID. They were all very ill. They were afraid that at least one of them was going to pass away. And he watched and he was in a really low emotional point. I wouldn't assume what he was thinking about doing, but you guys can catch my drift.
Right.
And then Luke came in Mandalorian, and he was the happiest. He was still thinking like, oh, I can't believe they did that. But he was the happiest little kid ever for a few minutes, because, you know, that brought him to YouTube, where he watched a video, and then it brought him to Star Wars Explored, and now he's working for us, and he has a living, you know, whereas before he didn't. He thought about...
It gave him purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the function of art hugely differs from person to person. There are going to be some people who simply don't care or are not influenced, but it can be life-saving sometimes.
That's awesome. And Mike, I think this is the whole idea of my podcast, you know, to have our takes on things, our interpretations, which are as valid as anyone else's. Look, okay, I studied art formally for almost 10 years. How are my ideas or thoughts any more valid than yours? None. I think we all partake in it. We all can discuss it. We all can come to an understanding. You know, and the funny thing is, I've never completely fully accepted or embraced everything I was taught. I kind of went along and I challenged ideas. And as I was being educated, I kind of arrived at my own conclusions. But I always came to this thought that, you know, art is a form of self-expression. Art is there to communicate ideas, whether it's to impart lessons, whether it's to record history. You look at the prehistoric caveman wall paintings of creatures. That's art. They painted something, sometimes with extreme level of detail and skill, to relate to just what they saw. And there's anything deeper than that in there. That's still art. Or you would look at something like a classical Greek sculpture, which obviously has intent, which obviously communicates something through its posture or feeling. Or when you look at Renaissance neoclassicism of sculpture, of like Roman sculpture, the Catholic sculpture, where it's Jesus Christ and Virgin Mary and crucifixion of Christ, obviously communicating ideas and emotions and feelings and philosophy and spirituality. All of it is there relating either smaller ideas or larger ideas. That is the function of art to me. And that's what Star Wars is. This is art has different permutations in different media and different forms. But as long as you have a creator, an object of his creation that is executed through skill or craftsmanship or knowledge and is infused with ideas or sometimes just emotions. Sometimes it's interpretational pieces that doesn't have clear A to B logical meaning. They just express emotion, like expressionist art, right? It is there to impart information to you. And I think, once again, to reiterate the point, we are all, it's a shared experience. You, Mike, a 20-plus-year-old, can walk into your local museum and look at a painting that was painted centuries ago, and maybe not necessarily do your own research on the artists or on the movement or the goal. They read the little plaque what the painting says, but you look with your critical eye and say, "Oh, I think this is what it means." And their original intent, original goal may have been lost in translation, as is with work of arts which are thousands of years old. But they're still relevant today because that communication still exists, because the observer is still there, because you're able to look at it and say, well, I wasn't there for the original Star Wars, right? This is 2013, let's say, and I'm 16 years old, and I'm just looking at this movie. But this is what I think it is. It is just as valid, just as important and encompassing as George Lucas and his original goal. My next question is, why is it popular 50 years later? Is it nostalgia? Is it demand for simple escapism? Is it family ritual that we used to sit and watch it back in the day? What do you think it is?
There's a lot of factors. I think that the main one is that Star Wars was intended to be timeless. It was meant to be something that George Lucas himself could watch 20 years later and think, wow, I made a damn good movie. It conveyed messages that 30 years later even, he still believed in when he made the next movies. And even when he was drafting his version of the sequels, although they all heavily differ, they all had the same kind of political or philosophical messages as his prior trilogies. I think that without a shadow of a doubt, we can look at Star Wars and say, whether it's A New Hope, whether it's Episode 1, there is some kind of philosophical lesson there. But even more than that, there is a political undertone from the creation of those movies that George Lucas put in and said to himself, okay, people might not agree. That's kind of the nature of politics. Right. But in 30 years, when I retire, I want to be able to watch this movie and say I was proud of it. Now, because of Jar Jar, maybe that's not the case with The Phantom Menace. But generally speaking, he made movies that he believed would be timeless. And I think that in general, that is what Star Wars has been. I think that Disney have been very faithful to that concept. And they've made movies which, whether you think the sequels are good or bad, they tried to play the safe side with politics and just go after the characters because they didn't want to mess up George Lucas's lineage of having these stories be able to be watched 30 years from now and still thoroughly enjoyed.
That's a very, very interesting take on it. It's like you're coming at it from the direction of the creator, what his goal was, what his intention was, and what is actually doing, as we can observe in real time. You come from the era of prequels. I come from the era of post-originals because I saw them in 87. Like, I was born in 81, right? I was too little to remember a Return of the Jedi as a kid. And then there's this now sequel generation of fans. But we all can observe what it's doing at the moment. We can all trace back and see the breadcrumbs and see what it was doing in the past. So I definitely agree with you. But I also feel that partially Star Wars is timeless because it taps into those mythological motifs that drives us to this day. Something that the classical Greeks were able to capture, something that ancient Egyptian pantheon or North mythology or pre-Christian Slavic paganism was able to observe sun worship, worshiping the earth, the soil upon which you walk. The Russians call literally their country Mother Earth, right? So it's that spiritual component to it. And it's also a primal need to tell and hear stories. Since the ancient campfires, we had this innate need, desire embedded in our DNA to sit the youngsters and impart on them sometimes through ritual, through some kind of like scary, costumed, masked exposition or demonstration that now you're part of the society, now you're part of the tribe. Here's a spear. You're an important component to this tribe. You're a hunter now. You have a weight of responsibility, right? All of these ideas that we see in Star Wars, that is what it was. It is also the innovative spirit of independent filmmaking, of George Lucas saying, no, I'm going to swim against the current. This is what they want me to do. You see that picture that is people, a lot of people are tweeting right now. It's like it's hot buzz where he is rocking a shirt where people are criticizing his original movie and he's wearing it. Like, this is what I am. I am a rebel. I am heavy metal. You know, this is what I'm into. And it's also on the fans' behalf, on the audience's behalf, a desire to return to beloved stories. And it once again trickles back to the dawn of time, the dawn of storytelling. You look at the classical legends and tales. Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, right? The Iliad, the great battle of the Trojan War, like great Achilles, great Hector, and their battle over this beautiful woman. It starts off with Iliad, and you have a hero of Odysseus who starts in one tale, and then X amount of time later, well, what is the continuation? We dig it. It's like the Odysseus guy, he was quite clever. He's like kind of interesting. He was an important, essential tool as training and learning lessons for younger generation. Can you do a sequel or something? And oh, here we go. The Odyssey, right? We got the sequel. So I think that's what it partially is. If you want to add something up, and then we'll move on to something different.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that whether he intended it or not, Star Wars has become so timeless in nature that anyone of any age can sit down and one of the Star Wars movies has like a 90% chance of hitting with them. And if they don't, they're not human. We don't dig with them. It's fine. But it is through so many things that, like I said earlier, he integrated so many cultures and ways of living and like the Bushido and so much of different cultures and beliefs and history that there's going to be something for everyone, at least even if it's the tiniest thing. There is something for everyone. And that means whether it's 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years in the future, someone's going to pick up a movie from Star Wars and be like, huh, I like this.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I want to tackle this topic a little bit, and I will do a little preface from my angle as a original trilogy fan. I want to talk about the creator and his creation and the people, the audience who absorb it, us, right? The end user, so to speak. So, George Lucas goes on and changes the world in 1977. He creates this movie, which literally overnight, within 1 week, becomes a global phenomenon. Something not many movies can say to this day. You could talk about hype, you could talk about global sales. One of the Fast and the Furious movies made over $1 billion, and 10 years from now, nobody will talk about it, nobody will remember it. We're talking about a shift, a paradigm shift on a global scale. He released it into the public eye, right? And for 15 years, it existed in its own narrative bubble. And what I mean by that is that just one trilogy existed. Yes, there were a couple of books that came out in late 70s, early mid-80s, and into the 90s, but not a lot to really for general audience or general film goers to pay attention to those. You could argue pro and against that. There were a lot more niche. We're talking about the original trilogy. It existed in its own bubble. Only those movies were available. And that created something very, very special, a very special moment, because a lot of audience, myself included, we spent the time digesting, analyzing, and also completing the story that went outside of the screen borders. What are these other guys like? Are there more dudes like Vader? That was my question. Boom, Inquisitors later on. Again, all of that didn't exist, but just to give you an idea. Or hey, the Emperor, why is he so old? Is he like 400 years old? What gives, right? Because the beauty of a story is that only supplies you enough information for the story to function and move forward. But the beauty of it, we internalize it, we make it personal by completing that mental picture. And we lived with it within our imagination for 15 years. Enter Prequels, 1999. And a lot of fans had a very visceral response to them. And a lot of fans, I'm not going to talk right now, tap into the whole vitriol or hatred or toxicity. I'm just taking legit. A lot of people, it didn't take with a lot of fans. It's like, I don't like this. It doesn't feel like Star Wars, just on a basic human level like that. And they moved on. Do you feel that Star Wars as a work of art belongs to its creator and he has the freedom and liberty to do with it as he please? Or is it something that belongs to all of us and is a shared experience?
I think it's definitely both. When it comes to the creation, it is a product of its creator, and it can be changed for what they want. But that is going to have knock-on effects with how we feel about that creation being modified that way. A lot of people who weren't happy about the prequels were a lot more upset when he did the special editions. So
I wasn't as upset, just for the record. I was a bit upset. A bits of it like unnerved me, but I was like, okay, or whatever.
And you know, I wish that George. So he had a almost fatal car accident. I mean, technically, I guess it was fatal. He died and he came back to life. But he had that experience, which is what led him to come to the conclusion that rather than have a set religion or anything, he believes in this kind of life force. And that is why the Force in Star Wars is a real replication of what he actually believes in real life.
Right.
So he had a involuntary philosophy lesson. I don't know why I butchered that.
No, that's a fantastic point. Life taught him like a very, very deep lesson through.
Life gave him a free philosophy lesson. But often he didn't really pursue anything. So he had this philosophy of what life and death means and how we should deal with it. But beyond that, he didn't really delve into it too much. And that basically led to him being in this pursuit of perfection, where he would edit his movies a bajillion times trying to make them better. And even if he himself believed that, a year later, he'd think, well, you know what? This new technology, all of a sudden, all my movies are garbage. Let's redo them. It doesn't bother me that he edited his movies. I think that he had the right to, because he owned Star Wars back then. And Disney have done their own silent fixes to the movies. They did a beautiful upscales to 4K, but they also completely changed the color correction, which is very weird.
They brought it back, more or less.
If
we look at the specialized editions, what Peter Harmey has done, he was very, very happy with those 4K upscales because they removed a lot of those magentas that you saw on 2011 DVDs, which they did with their special editions. So a lot of it was restoration, actually.
But nonetheless, like now that Disney have it in their control, they're not afraid to make changes either. They clearly believe that George was in the right to do that.
Right.
But that does still have an impact on the community. Now, I do think a little bit of change to a movie is kind of silly to lose your mind over. But with the creation of the prequels, George kind of changed the whole history of Star Wars. He said, hey, by the way, Vader, you're meant to feel bad for him. Here's why. And a lot of people didn't, because that didn't exist beforehand, that wasn't their Star Wars, I know that for you, going into it, one of your main complaints with the prequels is that, why is this the story? Like, why are we focusing on
we'll get to it, trust me. We'll get to it.
So like many different fans have this opinion, which is like, why did this need to exist? And to George Lucas, he was very adamant in protecting his creation. He said, like, it's my story. I think that this needs more explanation because a lot of people seem not to get it. And you're evidence of that. Not you, but like he was in general. And he would say, like, you're evidence that people don't get it. So I'm trying to explain it to you. Go watch the movie. And a lot of people did, and they were very disappointed because they didn't want that to be the story of Anakin Skywalker. They thought Darth Vader was just this cool evil guy and that Luke was the main character.
You're nailing it, man.
So
You're like
Yeah,
reaching out, you're pulling words, ideas out of my brain. It's like, okay, we're in the same wavelength. We established that link. You're literally pulling thoughts out of my mind. It wasn't that we had expectations and wanted to hit something. We were so excited. I was going crazy over Phantom Menace trailer, right? But here's the thing, to bring us back a little bit. To this day, I don't understand. And there is running theories there, fan theories, which I don't subscribe to fully. But here's the thought. A lot of people saying that Lucas felt so disillusioned with fans and with media and critics that he did it out of spite. Why don't the original copies, prints, exist? We know they do because fans are gathering them and restoring them, right? Including Peter Harmey. So why not have it like we have 4 different cuts, the director cut, the original cut, the second cut of something like Blade Runner, that exist all in one package, and you get to preserve the original, which we can't have with Star Wars, because when the Film Academy asked George Lucas to present his original film, because that's their criteria, to put Star Wars in the film preservation history, a thing, he wouldn't submit it. And I don't understand that. Because if you're changing the narrative, if you're changing your creation, if you're putting a twist on small, minute details that a lot of people find annoying, and I think the reason they're finding annoying is because a lot of younger generation don't even know what the originals looked like. And it pisses them off when an adult is being educated by somebody like, oh, you just don't know Star Wars. This is what it looks like. No, it doesn't, schmuck. And I say it without malice. Like, I don't try to be offensive. Like, no, you don't. Don't try to educate me. I have copies of the Star Wars as it was. Why can't we have both? So everybody can see at the document of it, of evolution of art. And then you get to agree or disagree with the latest versions that George Lucas had all the right in the world to do it. Like you said, it's his movies. I may disagree there were improvements. Other people like them. So big deal. But, I wanted to make a point that I think that as much as Star Wars belongs to George Lucas and it's his baby, it's his creation, it is also ours. We also took ownership of it, which is the next topic we'll talk about. And I believe that art lives. First of all, it outlives its creator. Look at antique art in museums. You can't shake the creator out of the ground and ask them what was the intent behind the thing. It outlived them. And the reason that it exists is because it's relevant to the current times. We still ask questions about Mona Lisa. What does it mean? We still look at the murals in Vatican and we say, wow, what is the goal there? What is happening in that story, The Last Supper? It sparks imagination, it sparks ideas and thoughts and dialogues, and the creator is speaking to us from the grave, from beyond, and informing us again and again and again. And our interaction with it keeps it alive. We keep the fire burning. We carry the torch into the future. So I think it's very, very wrong to say, well, no, it's just me. This doesn't have the right to exist because it doesn't have George Lucas's approval on it anymore. Who are these guys to interpret these characters? Well, they might be fans. They might be fans who are just as fervent about it and endearing to the Star Wars, and they want to share their experience. And then you, in an open forum, you get to agree or disagree with them. How close is it to George's creation or not? You see what I'm saying? So I do believe that it belongs to all of us. Once again, Mike, I want to give you the mic if you want to mention something quickly, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying. Again, this is where I think that I wish he had taken some kind of film philosophy class or something, because it seems like every director in the world got that class and knew to document their versions of their movies, except for George Lucas. His philosophy is to just be, if I want to put a daunting Twi'lek in the special edition of Return of the Jedi, I'm going to do it. And there's nothing you can do to stop me.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. I think the backstory of the project 4K77 is they were able to buy the original film and upscale it. So that would be an example, if the story is true. I don't know.
From what my understanding is, there's technical references to what is the original print of the actual film, and then the duplicates that were released to the theaters. And I think a lot of the stuff that project borrows, and I think Peter Harmey, I interviewed him as well on the channel, one of the copies made it into his hands from some kind of fan who had like an abandoned theater, and he had one of the copies. Those are all duplicates. Those are not originals. You're still able to work with them. And the testament is when you see those guys, the 4K, the upscale project, wonderful, wonderful work. I don't believe for a second that originals don't exist. I don't buy that for a second, but I don't know. Who am I to claim that it's true or not? It's just what they are working with are duplicates. They're not originals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because what I was going to say is that they have the originals or like the 20th version. Knowing George, he probably edited it a lot before it was even in the theater. But like, regardless of the copy they have, they were able to get the earliest known copies, I guess. So we got to be something earlier. You know, I'm sure there are areas of the Skywalker Ranch where people just can't go. You could probably be writing on a Star Wars project and not be allowed in a certain area, because I guarantee the original archive is there somewhere.
Yeah, good point. And again, guys who are watching this, neither I nor Mike, if I can speak on your behalf, we don't claim to be experts. We don't know the whole story.
I have a PhD in Star Wars. Come on. If
you guys feel like you want to educate us a little bit, give us hints, please drop your comments in the video section below. And Mike, with your permission, I'll move on to the next topic. Next, I want to tackle, before we get into the juicy part, the second half of this podcast, where we talk about comparing our notes on the Star Wars. I wanted to hit with this next topic. So now let's talk about the personal experience and, you know, how we take as fans, how we take ownership of Star Wars. You know, fans often, you and I will both encounter it on YouTube, on social media, on Facebook, Twitter. Hello there, Twitter fans. Fans get into it. You know, we argue, we analyze, we disprove each other. No, you're wrong. Let me present this evidence to you. You know, here's my list of facts. This is what I know. Where does this possessive aspect of fandom comes from?
I don't want to get too deep into philosophy, but humans, you know, it's nature. Who we are. It's what we're born to do. It's our nature to, if we really are invested in something, whether it be emotionally, mentally, physically, we get incredibly protective over it. And some of the worst parts of fandom is saying, because of how protective I am over this thing, you can jump off a building. It's
which I'm not going to do, guys. Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But you know, it's people. The worst in people can come out when they're protecting something they love, and a lot of people have an unhealthy attachment, for better or worse, with Star Wars, where they love it and care for it and protect it so much that if you disagree with me, Penn, I'm going to block you. That's the strongest weapon in my arsenal. I will block you and I will never talk to you again. And that is your loss, because I'm awesome and my opinion's correct. And it's such an unhealthy environment, because me and you, born in completely different eras, completely different places, completely different cultures, and here we are having a beautiful conversation about Star Wars. If this was on Twitter and we hadn't met before, you'd be blocked by now, because my human, well, not me specifically, but an average Joe's human nature would be, how dare you have a different opinion? How dare you think that this movie's better than my favorite one? You suck. And like, it's not productive at all, but it comes from our human nature, where for better or worse, we are incredibly protective over things that we care about.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. I don't have anything against like a counter argument. I wholly agree with you. I think one remedy is, which I try to do, and I don't want to sound sanctimonious, guys. I can be accused of any stuff that, you know, might transpire on social media. I'm not vile. I'm not malicious. Sometimes I just take a poke at somebody. Sometimes I say some nasty things. That's me. That's, again, I don't disassociate from being a human being. It's like you said, it's all our nature. Sometimes I get into it. I'm a very opinionated person. I am a very passionate person, right? I think that's an attribute that a lot of artists share. No. How dare you tell me? Like I'm having this discourse with a lady, which on Twitter, which I expressed to her. Look, I don't take you for your words on Twitter. I don't think this is who you are as a person. I'm not going to judge you. I might judge what you say and consider it BS, but I'm not going to judge a person based on that. I don't go there. I was born before social media. I started interacting with the internet as it became publicly available. I understand that psychology, that words don't represent people. But as much as I try to relate to people, which is a failed effort at this point on Twitter, to say that you guys are lacking nuance. You're extracting words out of what I'm not saying, because there's economy of words on Twitter, because that's exactly what Twitter wants you to do. It wants you to bark at each other, right? I'm not in it for that. But I think one of the remedy is to being able to look at yourself and say, Ben, maybe you're full of shit. Maybe you need it's okay for you to be put back in your place and have your ideas challenged. But once again, knowing my nature, knowing my personality, I'm going to call myself out right now. If I believe that I'm right, if I believe that my Alzheimer's is not there and my memory is pretty fresh, which memory, by the way, can be a very finicky thing, which you might recall as true fact, could not maybe very factually. And then that's why I turned to fans and I said, let me create a poll. Let me talk all the Star Wars fans, prequel, sequel, because I can't control what people are saying on YouTube. It's obviously not going to be biased, or it's going to be multi-biased. It's going to be a bunch of people supplying their shared experience. I don't care about, Rotten Tomatoes. I don't care about polls. I don't care about how many, what's the budget, what's the total gross income was of any Star Wars movie. I care about people talking about things. And this is the remedy in it, being able to look at yourself, that you might be full of it, and being receptive enough to listen to another person. So do you think, Mike, that there is a way to separate right from wrong opinion?
Only in ourselves, because opinions are subjective. That's the whole point of them. And if you have the opinion that The Lost Jedi is an awesome movie, I would agree with you now. Right. 4 years ago, I would have said you're a dumbass. 4 years ago, I would have burned your house down. I was an angry Star Wars fan.
Right.
And then I had my ideas challenged, and I realized, wow, this movie, it's actually not that bad. The sequels in general are not as bad as I thought they were. They're not amazing in my opinion, but they're a hell of a lot better than I gave them credit for. Because I was growing up, and again, human nature. I said, this is what Star Wars was when I was 2 years old, the original trilogy. This is what it was when I was 5 years old, the prequel trilogy. And now look at this piece of garbage. How did a multi-billion-dollar company create this piece of filth? Yeah. And now I look at it and I say, okay, maybe the guy with a $1,000 net worth in 2017 didn't have everything figured out.
Yeah, I follow you. I had a really interesting thought there. I was going to mention, guys, give me a second there. You were saying, please repeat what you were just saying a few minutes ago.
We were talking about why some opinions are what you were
separating the right from wrong, right?
Yeah.
I think I caught my thought, guys. Thank you, Michael. I think that as somebody who studied film, and once again, not to parade my knowledge out there or say that I know anything more about filmmaking than you guys do, just saying that coming from that background of studying film, I do believe that there are specific things that you could challenge and observe and say as far as craftsmanship is concerned. Some people created cinematic language, right? Then somebody introduced the acting methods on screen, right? Stanislavski's method, a famous Russian actor trainer who trained actors how to perform in front of the screen. The logics of storyboarding and storytelling, the rules of cinematography. That is all hard stuff that you can look at evidence and see what is and isn't effective. I don't think it's just as subjective. You can look at a martial arts film and where every piece of performance is cut into micro, cuts. It's not as effective as Jackie Chan's movies where he's performing martial art moves for several seconds, up to a minute on screen without interruption. You clearly see what is more effective, what works better because it's been proven and tested and proven again and again. What is subjective, what is highly opinionated is take on things. Hey, was that a proper rendering of Anakin's fall? Hey, could have they done something different with young Jake Lloyd's performance, or was it on point? Are there all the emotional beats there? Hey, was a Jar Jar character as a CGI model had enough texture work, or do you think it was fine enough because the performance kind of conveyed it? Then you also get into a more subjective territory, which is a lot more driven by our subjective view, our worldview, where we all come from. So it's both, I think. It's disingenuous to completely discard methodology of effective book writing, what makes a page turner. That's why there's countless how to write books. And each one obviously is different. It comes from a different biased angle, but they're all manuals. They're all instructions. They're all hearkening back to the fact that it's a science. It's been researched. There's several effective methods. Not all methods will work for every writer, but you get the gist of it. I'm getting off topic a little bit here. Now,
I
go
agree generally, but I mean, here's an example, right?
Yeah.
I think that The Lost Jedi is a good movie, but I think it's a terrible translation from script to screen, because the script
The Last
is,
Jedi, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's the writing of that movie.
Mike, we'll get in there. I promise. I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt you. We'll get into it. Do you mind?
Sure. I just one sentence. I'll say one sentence on this. The Lost Jedi is being taught in, I think it's at California University, on lessons on how to properly write a movie. But that's only that one university who's teaching that, right? So I can look at that, and from my point of view, I'd say, well, The Lost Jedi is written so well, they're teaching people how to write like it. But someone else could look at it and say, well, that's just one university in a world full of film schools. Like that's, what you're saying is 100% true in terms of there is, for each individual genre, maybe I would say, there is a specific way to do things, but it would still hit people very subjectively.
I follow you. And I think there is a case to be made that if it's something that one professor somewhere in school is using an example, it's something that is widely used across the media. If it's universally recognized, right? Mm-hmm. There are movies which are cross cultural and people view as like Akira Kurosawa's work. It's recognized by the world. If you didn't watch Seven Samurai and don't recognize it as a world classic, then I'm sorry, you don't know a lot about cinema. If you did not watch Clockwork Orange, now you may dislike it. Your personal preference is not part of this segment here. The segment is that is recognized by the world cinema, and not just Hollywood or like global awards. It's lived throughout history with us, and people still learn from it. It's there. It's hard evidence. It's factual. Okay. The reason, I'm sorry, Mike, it's my mistake. I apologize. I didn't want us to jump the gun a little bit because I really want to get into it now and get into the second part of our podcast, the juicy part. If you have particular instances, examples, characters that you would also like to throw in, by all means, we could actually take turns. It's up to you. But if you don't mind, I would like to launch it and have a little experiment, what you and I would just discussed, and now get into the nitty and gritty of it. Two fans from two different generations having different takes on Star Wars, and just to illustrate the point how things could be very subjective and how things can intersect, how we can agree or disagree. And take it all as we're talking about all of the Star Wars, the trilogies, all three of them, the books, the comics, whatever you want to use as your example.
Okay.
Number one, the Jedi Order. Who are they in to you personally? Who are they in prequels? Who are they versus the original trilogy, or however you want to tackle it?
Okay, I'll try and tackle all of them because I think they're all relevant. To me, the Jedi Order is meant to represent those fighting for good, whether it be, here's the thing, right? This is going to get me in hot water. Hitler genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. He was still a terrible person, but he genuinely believed in his deluded brain that he was doing the right thing for the world.
Right.
The Jedi Order is a group of people who genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, even if they have to do some evil things to get there. Like Mace Windu is a good example. He's done some terrible things, but he believes in the pursuit of good. But overall, they did significantly less good than they thought they were doing. They changed the galaxy in a less positive way than they thought they would. They became stagnant, I guess. They became arrogant. They stopped paying as much attention to details. Even there's a line I absolutely love. I believe it's in the Revenge of the Sith novel. Yoda realizes millennia before he was born that the Jedi were already lost. Like they already, the stone was already set and they were going to fall. Yoda's mistakes as a leader just accelerated it. And so even though Yoda genuinely believed every move he was making was correct because he was always reflecting and asking the Force gods of what he should do, he still messed up. I think that the difference between the Jedi in the original trilogy and the prequels is that in the original trilogy, Yoda and Obi-Wan tell Luke, kill Vader. They hide the fact that he is his father, and they say, kill him, Luke, go kill Vader. At first, Luke says he's going to go save his friends, and they're like, no, Luke, come on, but you got to finish training. And then in the sixth movie, they say, kill him. The word they use is kill. They say kill Vader, right?
Wait, did they literally say it, or didn't Yoda say you must confront him face to face? I don't remember the word kill.
It might have been in the novelization, but I remember the word kill.
Not the film. I don't remember that being said in the film.
My understanding is that Yoda was kind of a better person, I guess, and he was like, "Look, Luke, you've been training as a Jedi. I'm dying. You gotta go face Vader." Obi-Wan was like, it might not have been killed, it might have been destroyed, but he was like, no matter what, you've got to take care of Vader. This guy's got to go down. Yeah, exactly. He was trying to instill in Luke the belief that Vader was a goner. He had to be killed for the galaxy to be good. Eventually, Luke figures out Vader is his father, and he says, no, I'm going to save him. And even, I believe, in Return of the Jedi, when he has that conviction, Obi-Wan is still like, Luke, buddy, come on, you gotta, I tried to save him, you gotta end him.
He's still playing like, his tune, right?
I save him. Yeah. And so, like, there's a clear transition from the prequels to the originals in the sense of the Jedi are a lot darker. They're willing to do a lot more nasty things. But then you realize, if you take a real close look at whether it be the Clone Wars or even Episode 3, where the Jedi tell Anakin to spy on the Chancellor and betray one of his closest friends, the Jedi have always been douchebags, at least as far as the prequels are concerned. Maybe in the Old Republic era, they weren't as dirty, but they kind of were. We've never really seen the Jedi be these saints that they like to believe themselves as. They believe that they are the saints of the Force, protecting the peace. But in reality, they've always done slimy stuff.
Yeah.
And they believe it's in the pursuit of good. But, like I said, it ended up not being that.
Right. That's a very interesting take. The reason that I wanted to start there is because it was my biggest point of contention with the prequels. Remember how earlier I started the podcast with saying that the original trilogy for 15 years was in its own bubble. No more stories were to be told. And you can't blame fans for having their own merry time with fulfilling that fantasy. That's what made it beautiful. That's what we fantasized about. And I had to work with cheaply dubbed, pirated versions, Russian versions of the films. That's things like Clone Wars or Anakin's names was misconstrued and it wasn't represented. I didn't even think about it until I saw the movies in English years later as a teen, right? So I had to fulfill the fantasy in my own way. And in my child's mind, that most sensitive, most beautiful time when you interact with these stories, the Jedi they're not even warriors in the greater sense like Templar Knights. They are these old monks, these ancient wizards like the Lord of the Rings wizards that are few in number for some reason because something happened in the past, and that everyone reveres them based on their wisdom because that's what Obi-Wan Kenobi is in The New Hope, my favorite Star Wars movie. He's a samurai. This is who Yoda is in episode 5 and 6. He's the mentor. Her first appears as this, funny, crazy hobgoblin, but turns out to be an old sage, like in a lot of Eastern traditions. That's who they represented to me. It was a crystallized good versus evil tale that I saw in other fantasy films of the time. Okay, for example, Mio, My Mio was written by this Scottish female author that was translated into the fantasy film, Willow, and so forth and so forth. These crystal ideas of pure good versus pure evil. Vader was pure evil, the Jedi were pure good. And they weren't militant, they weren't soldiers, they weren't running around telling people what to do. There were these guys who are like Luke, who are nothing but giving, nothing but love, nothing but, no, I'm not going to strike down my father. I will redeem him. I have to save you, Dad, right? And when that was challenged in prequels, when we saw arguably a very compelling look on the Jedi, a very sobering look on the Jedi, something that took me years to wrestle with, and in order for me to enjoy the Clone Wars, in order for me to enjoy this book, which I'm enjoying a lot, you have to appreciate the fact that I had a lot of things to reconcile. I'm like, okay, this is who the Jedi are. That's what George Lucas wanted to portray them. Do I agree? No. What am I going to do? Sit and fume about it all day? Accept something that you can't change. This is a story now. This is the narrative. Live with it. Accept it or let it go. Don't get into 20-hour Twitter debates with people how about somebody's wrong. Live with it. That's what I had to do. And I wanted to share this for fans to being able to appreciate where I'm coming from, right? It's everything I grew with, everything that meant so much to me, down the drain. And I feel like cursing now just by feeling it. And for a very long time, I was so mad with George, not because he misrepresented the ideas that I wanted replicated on screen again, or complete outline of the story that I wanted. I genuinely went into theater besides myself with thrill. Like, oh my God, the hype for prequels will never be repeated again, I believe. because it was still George Lucas, still in his prime, and it was his chance to continue the story with the original cast when they were still young, and he didn't go that route. He decided to tell me the story that we all knew the ending to. From the very first minutes, I knew who Kenobi is. I knew that Qui-Gon is going to die. I knew who young Anakin is going to turn to. I knew who Palpatine is. We'll get into all of those characters. But my fantasy of it was ruined, and was mostly ruined by the fact that I could not relate or associate with characters on screen because their performances were once again... I can't understand how you take talented actors and you put them on screen to tell your vision, and there's such a dissonance from what I now view as beautiful story from the way that you're portraying it. I'm going on a rant. This could be a 10-hour podcast if I get into it. We could let's move on to the next one. Take another stab at Senator Palpatine and the Emperor Palpatine. Who is he to you?
There's
Take your time.
My opinion of him has always been the same. He is meant to be, I won't say that's poor wording. To me, he symbolizes pure evil, right? He symbolizes someone who, even in the expanded universe from Legends, his childhood, he murdered his parents. He didn't care. He was always evil. He's a delusional freak. And he happens to be a very clever one. He sneakily manipulates his way into so many back-end deals, so many back alley deals of gaining power, slowly amassing. I guess he already had wealth because his family was wealthy. But he builds up his wealth. He builds up his resources. Builds up his connections. He builds up. I believe maybe it's Darth Maul Shadowhunter, one of the Legends novels that I recently read. He literally gets Maul to get dirt on political opposition so that he can get them on his side and bring them into his pocket. He symbolizes pure evil, who is evil for evil's sake, who wants to do evil things to the galaxy because he is evil, but he does them in the smartest ways possible. However, the Emperor in the original trilogy seems a lot dumber after you watch the prequels, because in the prequels he's so careful, he's so methodical. He has
go for it.
He has so many different middlemen, right? He's never caught in a bad situation, whereas it wasn't always this way. I'm assuming that when you had seen the original trilogy for the first time, and I would have an opinion if I remembered my childhood more, because I grew up with the originals first. I'm assuming that for you, he was a very intimidating character. Like, this is the guy who trained Vader. This is like the ultimate power of the galaxy. And I don't know whether you thought his death was foolish or fine or whatever, but he was only overthrown because he was so busy doing evil things to someone. But I think after seeing the prequels and seeing how careful and methodical he was, and obviously there's an in-universe explanation, which is he's so arrogant about having Vader wrapped around his finger that he doesn't care. He doesn't think he's ever going to betray him. So I understand there's an explanation for it, but he just feels a lot more stupid, I guess, in the OT. I mean, in episode 5, he's totally fine. But in episode 6, he just comes across as this person who was grown so used to his power that he just became careless, like Darth Maul. And he was so disappointed in Maul for doing that he got 2 new apprentices to make sure that they wouldn't fail.
Versus the snake on the tree that we see in the prequels, where like conniving and seducing Anakin slowly through intrigue and manipulation. He's a child abuser too. Not physically, but he is a child abuser. He exploits Anakin, right?
Completely from the... Oh man, this is something that I think is done really well in the Phantom Menace novelization. But there's not much that novel does well, but this is one aspect.
I haven't read the novelizations yet. I really plan to. A lot of fans are telling me it's great. My encounter with Palpatine was through Cloak of Deception, which I adore James Luceno. I'm there, like, read this novel, Cloak of Deception. You want to see the top tier Palpatine, read that novel.
James Luceno is one of my favorite authors. That is not my favorite book. But I can still respect, like, it does Palpatine work. But yeah, it feels like this is a perfect example. In the prequel trilogy, he is introduced as this person who literally grooms a 9-year-old boy to be his evil apprentice. And then in the original trilogy, he's just kind of like, it's terrible. Like, that's the thing. George Lucas did that in such a subtle way. A lot of people don't even realize to this day that he was grooming Anakin.
Can I counter you, please? What I think, before I jump on the offensive with my own point, I think the biggest issue was, aside from my biased view, which I will express, it's not, people didn't dislike Ian McDiarmid because he's amazingly trained theatrical performer, right? Actor. It's a lot of people had a gripe with the dialogue, that it didn't feel mature and nuanced or layered enough, which a lot of it happens through novels. And a lot of it, me too, I was reintroduced to that character through books. And when I found that political debate and nuance and believability and groundedness in the novels, and I was like, oh, that's what who Palpatine is. Okay, that's not what I imagined, but let me eat this up. This is good stuff. The snake version of the pill? Okay, all right. So I kind of bought that version, but if you don't mind, I want to jump into my side of it. There is no Palpatine to me. He doesn't exist. In the Star Wars that I know, there's only the Emperor. Faceless, nameless, ancient evil. He's Saruman. He's so old. He's not shriveled. His face is not burnt. His fingernails are like this. His hands are all shriveled up. Life is sucked out of him in the original films. He doesn't need a face. He doesn't need a backstory, because everything that his character fulfills in episode 5, little bit, tiny bit, and in episode 6 is portrayed there. It's the arrogance of evil to believe in its own power, that a single light in the darkness, like Luke Skywalker, is able to defeat it and vanquish the darkness. That's all he is. That is his entire function. That is the only gear in this whole machine to work. Now, when I saw him as a kid, yes, he was intimidating. Yes, he was scary. Guess what? I don't think a 6-year-old or 5-year-old child's mind is intrigued by politics, because everything is immediate. Everything is in front of our faces. We get to appreciate the political aspect. That's my argument. As we mature. Oh shit, it's really layered, and he's coming at them at that side, and now he's manipulating young Padme, and now he's aligning all the senators and delegates to support him, and this and that. That's what adults thrive in. And that's what I think George wanted to satisfy both camps. Adults who took their kids to see those clearly children portrayals of political game. And my argument is that Palpatine is a far stronger character in the novels. But for me as a kid, he was this ancient evil. The single lines of dialogue that he sells to Luke, your faith in your friends is yours. And now, young Anakin, you will die. Pa-pam! And when he strikes with that lightning, I was freaking terrified as a kid. And that's all I needed, because it's the immediacy of what you see on screen. The personification of evil. That is the genius of it. The most simple stories survive the longest. That's my argument for him. Moving on. If you have other examples, by the way, please add them. I would tackle your choice as well.
I will say, I can't disagree with you. I think that I remember being a child and being very afraid. That's all I can say from my experience. But I can certainly understand from yours. For a decade and a half, your only interpretation of Palpatine was
this guy.
He had the name.
This
he was
guy.
Just this guy.
Yeah.
Was immensely powerful. He was the king of kings. He was just like the ruler, and Luke was the single person who had enough goodness in him to be able to take that evil down.
Yeah.
And I can totally respect that. That's a very I wouldn't say it feels bad. It's like that opinion is being lost to time, because eventually both of us are going to die, and both of our viewpoints are going to be history, and the new Star Wars fans are going to be the only ones, and they might
reinterpret it and change. The narrative will constantly change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Moving on to the next topic. This could get really, really long-winded. If we could kind of like keep it a little bit concise, because I have a couple of other examples after this.
Sure.
Looking at all 3 trilogies, love them or hate them, we have now the conclusion of Skywalker Saga. Even though George Lucas told us that Episode 6 is the last of the Skywalker Saga, there is no more stories to tell, it's over, and yet he came up with more treatments for a sequel trilogy, including all the characters, including Luke. I guess he was not done with it. It is not a blame, it's not a challenge to George Lucas. He's a God Almighty. He gets to do what he wants. He felt like, hey, perhaps I'm not done with these characters. Let's retrieve those footnotes that I had in the 80s. Let me continue that saga. Anakin's fall and redemption in prequels. Luke's hero's journey in the originals. and Rey Palpatine picking up the mantle of Skywalker. What is Skywalker Saga to you? Where does it end?
That's a good question. There's an example in Legends, right? The Legacy comics, very good series. I would not consider that to be the Skywalker Saga. I think that that is the future of the Skywalker lineage, because the guy is called Cade Skywalker. But I wouldn't go as far as calling that the Skywalker Saga. Oh, I'm so jealous. Those are so good.
Yeah, and so rare.
It
that's
is.
what we're talking about, Cade.
Yeah,
Keep
wonderful. So it's just I wouldn't. There's no hard limit, right? I can't say in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years after Luke dies, that's the end of it. But I think we're at a position now in canon, at least, where Rey has Luke's teachings. Presumably, she's going to be able to commune with him through the Force somehow and get even more teachings, because I don't think she's done. But for better or worse, she's going to be, hopefully, the Grand Master of the New Order, and she will be able to impart lessons that Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Luke, and all the other Jedi learned over the many years. I think that the Skywalker Saga ends there, and now, hopefully, if Disney actually, it's so good. The art in Legacy is one of my favorite.
Yandor Shema, she's a goddess. She's a goddess.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, no, of course. So I think that we're at a wonderful point now where Disney, if they wanted to, unfortunately, it seems like they're not interested in pursuing sequel content or post-sequel content. But I think we're at a wonderful point where we can split the story and say 1 to 9 is the Skywalker Saga. This is the legacy and lineage of Shmi and Anakin and Luke and everyone involved. And now we have the potential for the future of Star Wars to be all about the descendants of Rey or the descendants of Finn or whoever, and pursue those stories with the context of the wonderful knowledge that Luke and Anakin have gathered and passed down, but told in a different way for a new era of humans on the planet. Because now we're at a point where the sequels have been out for long enough that a new generation is about to be born, if they ever make post-sequel content, that there will be a different generation of people who watch the sequels versus who watch the post-sequel content. So it's a hard question to answer, and I think I've done a pretty sloppy job of answering it.
No. I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I love hearing your thoughts on this.
Thank you. I think that we're at a wonderful place now for it to be over, and I don't think it should continue. But there has to be some kind of future for the existing Skywalker Saga. We had the Lego game, the Skywalker Saga. They released a wonderful 4K box set of the Skywalker Saga, which is very expensive. I think they need to either periodically renew the Skywalker Saga and resell it so that new fans can pick it up, or they need to find some way of creating tie-in material that doesn't disturb the existing story. Like, for example, the Brotherhood novel, amazing novel, love it so much.
Yeah.
If they can keep doing stuff like that within that time period, but also build up the past and the future of the Skywalker, but what came before and after the Skywalker Saga, then I think Star Wars will be at a beautiful place.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that the Star Wars legacy is a post-modernistic take on Skywalkers. It's the not even the great name or influence of Luke. It's one of the Luke's descendants becoming a man of his own. Not necessarily a Skywalker, a man of his own, stepping out of the father's shadow, very much like Luke stepped out of Vader's shadow in the original trilogy. So for me, as far as the Skywalker saga goes, remember I told you earlier that prequels are something, and I just watched episode 1 yesterday. I'm doing the prequel marathon for my Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I just want to rewatch them. I enjoy watching them. I like it because that's what the story is, right? This is something that I had to reconcile and accept as that's part of Star Wars. I love prequel novels, but to me, Skywalker Saga is Luke Skywalker. It begins with episode 4 and it ends with episode 6. It's a young man's journey to rise to the occasion, not through midichlorians or his blood cells or his lineage, but attain power and perform great deeds through personal accomplishment. The Rey, as much as I enjoy, I say it as the Last Jedi lover, which is I find a deeply flawed film. It's my favorite of the new trilogy films. I even enjoy The Rise of the Skywalker. Deeply flawed films. And I say that they didn't need to go there. It's all derivative. It's all too similar. They needed to focus on the new cast that had nothing to do with Skywalkers, because the Star Wars universe is this large, and you could tell infinite amount of stories in the same archetypes as Luke, but not necessarily him, as the example shows with the expanded universe. I kind of sort of took Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy as my sequels for a long time, because there's such a logical continuation of these characters. But even then, what I've read in the expanded universe, and I've been reading it since 1997 or 98, none of it, honest, and I say it sincerely as a fan, it never quite tackled that Luke, my childhood Luke, my Luke, right? That quest ends with episode 6. There's nothing else to tell. And George Lucas, to me, was right in that. Leave it alone. Don't reinvent it. Don't reinterpret it. It is flawless. Just like it is impossible to remake the original Ben-Hur film, the movie that rightfully earned 14 Oscars back when Oscars meant something. You cannot replicate it. You cannot even begin to recreate it, because it is such a huge part of time and history and filmmaking and aesthetic of filmmakers and integrity of filmmakers, how it was done back in the day. You cannot do it again. Same with Star Wars. Leave Luke Skywalker alone. Like Will Smith had said it quite differently at the Oscars. He had a different line for it. Replace it with Luke. Okay. And we're moving on. So that's what Skywalker Saga to me is. Rey Skywalker, I embrace her. She is a role model for a new generation of fans. She was sweet and innocent to me. I enjoyed her coming of age story. To me, she's Rey No One. That works to me. In my mind, it works the best for her character. Accomplishments through personal deeds, not through Skywalker name. Next one. Star Wars Rebels animation. It's a new beginning. It was the first outing from the Disney before we got the first major motion picture. It's like, here's a taste of what we prepared for you guys. Hey, you enjoyed that Dave Filoni guy? Those of you who are Clones fans, let's get him over here. Come on. New technology, new bells and whistles, create Star Wars Rebels. Did it fulfill your expectations and that promise of the potential of Star Wars?
So here's the thing, and this is a thing a lot of people still don't really understand. Rebels was advertised as Clone Wars 2. It was advertised as a continuation of those character stories, and that's not what it is. The Clone Wars was like a faux anthology kind of thing. They called it one, but it really wasn't. It still followed the same characters on consistent stories. Whereas Rebels is a new crew, a new face, a new role model, and tying into legacy characters that, I think I'm the perfect audience for Rebels. When it came out, I was like, I don't know. I like these new guys, but where's Ahsoka? Where's my boys? I grew up from 2008, going off to school, coming back home, and instantly Clone Wars will be on TV as soon as I got home. It's like, oh, awesome, Clone Wars. And then they canned it, and I was like, oh man, my off to school sessions will never be the same. Mm-hmm. And then Rebels came out, and I was like, okay, back to normal. But who the hell are these guys? And at first, I really didn't like it. Again, same story as with the sequels. I hated it at first, but then I got a little bit older. I rewatched them, and I realized, wow. I think, and this is a very hot take, I think no one on the planet would ever agree with me here. I think Ezra's hero's journey is better than anything else in Star Wars, and in terms of the hero's journey. I think that Ezra, the way he's written, I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible.
No, take your time. Don't make it quick. One
of the greatest pieces of animated content ever, in my opinion, and definitely something that I think a lot of people it influenced their life in a very positive way. Avatar: The Last Airbender. Originally, the original story arc, to my understanding in full, maybe just the first season, was penned by Dave Filoni, and he worked very closely on that series before being hired by George Lucas. And the outline, to my understanding, that he created for Sokka's character was this very annoying brat who doesn't have much talent, gets in the way of everyone doing important stuff, eventually is able to dedicate himself to studying something and becoming good at something, becoming a useful asset to the team, and then happily ever after, the team is together, they win, and whatever. There is I'm sure there's a great video on YouTube about this already, so I won't explain it too much, but someone decided that, you know what, Dave, that was such a good idea, copy paste it for Ahsoka. And they decided that they would apply that to Ahsoka. She started off as this bratty kid. She got an entire squadron of clones killed under her command, and
Yeah.
she was a very flawed character, but on purpose. Yeah. And that's the key, is she was written in such a wonderful way that she was purposefully so annoying and arrogant and ignorant. Mm-hmm. And over time, she was forced in a time of warfare to learn from her mistakes and to mature and to grow up. And she was so mature that she decided Jedi Order isn't for me anymore, and she left. Mm-hmm. And when she left, it was a really emotional moment for everyone, because it's like, wow, Ahsoka, oh my God, like 5 years earlier, we wouldn't have imagined that we would have such an emotional, it would have such an emotional impact to see her go.
And like fully realized character too, from start to finish.
Exactly. It's wonderful what they were able to do with her. And I feel like it's kind of Mike's little conspiracy theory. But I think they also took that template and copied and pasted it for Ezra, because he starts off as so annoying, and had to be on purpose. Yeah. So annoying, gets in the way. Any good stuff he does, it's by total accident. And then the guys, Sabine, Kanan, and Zeb are on a mission trying to save some people, and they get stuck. And they're calling for backup, and no one's going, because Hera needs to stay with the ship. Chopper can't do anything. He's a droid. Mm-hmm. And so Ezra is there, and he's forced to be like, these people saved me from the Imperials like a planet ago. Hera, you're occupied? Can we just leave them? And then Hera gives him this little speech, and then he goes and risks his life to save them. And that's first example in season 1, but throughout all of the seasons of Rebels, he has these moments of character growth. And he goes from being that bratty, annoying kid who didn't know how to use the Force to being an impactful character who made the ultimate sacrifice, and hopefully now is the future of Star Wars content for many years to come with the Ahsoka series. So I really think that just in that one aspect from the storytelling, Star Wars Rebels is the greatest showcase of the hero's journey in anything ever, really, in my opinion.
I'm not going to knock it. I'm not going to even counter it. I have nothing. Because how you expressed it, yeah. But I do have a slightly different take on it. Like, so I remember when they took the Clone Wars from Disney HD, because George Lucas filmed the first season. He was so confident in his Clone Wars show. I'm pretty sure you remember the story. And then he was kind of looking and pitching what, program, what channel will pick it up. Everybody was like, it was almost like an auction. Everybody, oh my God, we want Star Wars or anything. He was that confident. It was that good. So he landed on Disney HD, right? And then from there, I think they took it to Netflix. And when they cut it off,
Cartoon Network,
right? There was first a worry, like, oh man, they discontinued it. But at first, in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of animosity towards Disney. Like, okay, so what's next? They canceled the show. I honestly remember when Rebels was first announced, and guys, once again, who's watching this podcast, you're free to correct me. It wasn't advertised as the Clone Wars 2.0, not at all, because it was aesthetically different. It was a promise of a new characters, a new generation of heroes. You didn't recognize anyone from there. No Kenobi, no Bail Organa, nobody. They kind of cameoed them in later in, but in the beginning, like, none of it is there. It's a completely new show with a completely new aesthetic style. I was in animation school back then, with a completely new look, which incorporated Ralph McQuarrie's work. It's basically, when you look at it, it's Ralph McQuarrie in motion, including the thin lightsabers, which a lot of current generations was like, what is this? These are stupid. What the hell is that? I'm like, look at the original paintings. It kind of looks like that, right? Because it's kind of like homage. And we lived through a generation, 10 years, a decade of prequel content, prequel material. The trilogy of films, the Clone Wars series, all the novels, the comic books, the micro series in early 2000s, right? By Gennady Tartakovsky. And now we're shifting back to the Imperial era again. And we see stormtroopers. Like, oh my God, what is this? From the moment I saw it, and to this day, like you said, it is one of the greatest Star Wars stories ever told. It is so compelling. It is so well structured. It takes its time. It takes its space. I personally believe all of the animations, and we'll get to the other one in a second, are the best thing that happened to Star Wars since 1983. better than expanded universe, better than a lot of stuff out there, which I enjoy. I don't know, something about it that takes even characters which took time for me to adjust, like Mace Windu, Jar Jar Binks, who I love in the show. Mace Windu, like the militant Jedi, the politics of it, the Palpatine that you see. I'm like, Ben, just shut up and eat it, man. Just shut up. This is too good. This is too great of a stuff to miss out on. And this is what Rebels meant to me. And the fact that it was much more fluid animation, much more consistent lightsaber battles, which didn't feel choppy anymore like they did in Clone Wars. They were good in Clone Wars, but they improved them tenfold in Rebels, and even more now in the show we're going to talk about, which I absolutely loved. I loved and reveled in the fact that there is no Skywalkers in there, no familiar characters. And the cameos that were there, for example, the episode where we see with Leia Organa, a teenage Leia, was an extrapolation of a scene that we saw in the Star Wars original radio drama, which has a lot of added scenes, right? They took that scene, they remodeled, retooled it a little bit, and they put it in the show. I'm like, guys, you remember me? You remember the original fans? I love it. You know, like it's a moment like of triumph for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, and here comes the Bad Batch. What's going on with that?
I need to rewatch it. I need to give it another chance because I hate the Bad Batch. I think it is one of the worst things ever created, and I don't want to think that. I think the animation is absolutely beautiful. The voice artists are so talented. I don't want to hate it, but I remember doing the weekly show, How I Met You the First Time, with Star Wars Tonight, and every single episode, at the first maybe 5 episodes, I was hopeful. I was like, they're handing it some real nice stuff here, guys. And then it got to a point where we had Levi Bond on for one episode, and I gave it a 1 out of 10. I was so disappointed. I think it might have been the episode where they destroyed Camino. I was so disappointed, and we spent the whole podcast debating my 1 out of 10 rating because no one agreed with it at all. I really need it. It's been a year now. Right? I need to rewatch it. I need to give it another chance. I need to open myself up to it because I want to be able to enjoy it.
So you're still hot on it.
Yeah.
You're still not settled. Okay.
Yeah. So many people have positive things to say about it, or at the very least, if they didn't enjoy it much, they have something to appreciate. I'm like, okay, it looks good. That's about it. But I'm going to give it another watch. I might start today actually after this show, and I hope that in a month's time I can look at it and say, you know what, it wasn't made for me, but I like it. It's
I love your receptive, like your self, like introspective view, and it's like, hey, maybe I need to take a look. Maybe it's not what I thought. That's why I saw Phantom Menace like several times in theaters. I saw it a decade after in 3D. Believe it or not, I went to the 3D premiere. I'm like, I gotta give my homage to George Lucas. Boom. By then, of course, I warmed up to it a lot more, but still, it's like not a great movie for me. Anyway, anything else you wanted to add to Bad Batch, or can I take a stab at it?
You can take a stab at it. I just they made a lot of hints in terms of like Easter eggs and stuff that they didn't deliver on. Hopefully, season 2 is going to do that, but the ending of season 1, you know, with them just leaving Crosshair there, so unsatisfying. That's what I was holding out on the whole show, and it just didn't deliver.
So the Bad Batch is my favorite Star Wars show, without a doubt, without comparison, and several reasons for it. It showed me how much of a fan I was of the stuff that I was negligent of during the prequel decade, all those characters. And so what happened was, when the first episode happens... Mike, give me 1 second, okay? Ребята, можете под дверью не разговаривать? All right. Same situation over there. So like I said, the Bad Batch instantly became my favorite because something happened. The first episode hits you. And honestly, I had a lot of questions. I didn't know what to expect. Even though we meet them at the final season of the Clone Wars, you know, I'm like, okay, so they're introducing this Bad Batch. And then on the heels of it, first of all, I was alerted to it as an animator, somebody who studied it professionally. I'm like, why are you introducing 5 new characters at the end of the show? What's going on here? Yeah, they're going to be a new show. I knew it right away, right? So you could pick it up and you could tell it. Ребята, можете под дверью не говорить? Papa! Hold on a second.
No problem.
Ребят, извините, пожалуйста, можете потерять, я записываю с парнем видео. Fucking bullshit, Star Wars! Let me start over a little bit. Yeah. No worries, there'll be some cutting here in this podcast, but whatever, we're closing it up. Okay, so I was on... where was I? What was the last thing I said?
You were talking about how your background in animation, you saw these new characters, they were very unique. You knew there was going to be a show about them.
Yeah. So, and you see these characters, and I'm wondering, so it's going to be a next show. And something very unexpected happened with the first premiere hit. Not only was 70 minutes of probably one of the greatest Star Wars premieres I've seen. It just blew my mind. But also, it was such an amazing homage to what was with Wolf Yularen, reintroducing it as something that is not quite the Clone Wars 2.0, but a transfer of generations. This is where we started, Clone Wars, and this is where we're going. We're going to the Imperial era, the very same way that the Rebels did, right? And now we're introduced to a whole new cast of characters, and this whole thing is happening. And by the middle of it, and once again, from my angle, from my perspective, it is layering. When it was announced that Dave Filoni is doing it, my heart is always confident. I'm like, it's Dave Filoni. Just wait for it. I don't have to worry about it. It's Dave Filoni. I'm good. Because he understands the heart and soul what makes Star Wars. I would argue he is George Lucas with all the capacity to execute the vision. And when the story hits, he's layering it. He's giving you chunks of these characters. And to a lot of criticism that I hear from the fans, why is this story arc? This feels like a quest, a fetch quest. Why are they diverting to this planet? To me, it is all because I understand Dave Filoni's mind in my own way. Again, I'm not imposing my opinion on anyone else, but I see the opera he's playing. I see the orchestra he's leading. Oh, okay, so we're going to this part here, and this incident happens to Omega. And then something else happens with this character. And this, when you pile it up all together, these are the small details that align the story to you. They align your perception of who these people will be when you hit them with something larger than life, larger than something they can overcome. And I was so, first of all, Omega is introduced there like, here's a little kid there, and here are the heroes. So you kind of have your expectations homed in on them. And something magical happens by the middle of it. The focus shifts. Somebody that you paid attention to in Clone Wars, the clones, arguably the heroes of that show. It took us a while to figure out we're seeing Anakin, we're seeing Ahsoka, we're seeing Kenobi, we're seeing Windu, but they're the brunts of it. They're the ones who carry the war on their shoulders. It's Fives and Echo and all of these guys and Rex and they're the heroes. It's their war. We praise them. And here, now there's a shift of focus. We go from clones to this young clone who is older than them, but she's also a Luke Skywalker archetype. She has a lot to learn about this world. And yes, she's being a little bit annoying and naive, and her ideas about her safe place of the world is being challenged with this catastrophe, this war, this empire, right? And we got to the end, and I love Omega. I love everything with her, how we travel through that journey. And when we get to the end, I get goosebumps. I'm about to cry, dude. Literally, I don't cry during podcasts. Goosebumps. When we get to that final episode, and it is Tarkin, it's tackling those ideas that I enjoyed. Two things happen in the season finale. When I saw the abandoned Tipoca city, no clones, silence, and these signature Imperial cruisers from my childhood come in, and they destroy it. I literally want to cry, dude. I'm watching it. I was silent through the whole thing. I hardly ever respond to that like that to any media. I'm like, oh yeah, Star Wars, cool. I was silent. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm responding to clone material like this. And by the end of it, I'm like, wow, what a bold move. Destroying Tipoca. This is iconography. It is so important to prequel fans, and you're destroying it in a meaningful way. You're destroying part of what makes Star Wars so great. What? Holy shit, dude. And then we go from there to something different. I'm about to cry. So I grew up, part of my teenage years was the Throne trilogy, right? This is before the whole Twitter exploded. So I'm watching it, Like, hold on a second. All right, so there's this another military guy. There's Tarkin, but they're grabbing the cloners, the Kaminoans. The hell is going on here? And I know my EU. And then this ominous music plays. I see the mountain. I'm like, dude, get the fuck out of here. Is this Wayland? No, you're not doing this. And boom, boom, boom. The music is playing. And we're traveling there, and they land. I'm like, oh, Dave Filoni knows my heart. He's like, oh, shit. All right. It's generations of Star Wars fandom coming together in one. It's prequels, it's original saga, it's the Bad Batch, which is entirely its own thing. The integrity of Omega, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this will be disputed in a couple of years, mark my words, she will become Ahsoka. She will become Ezra Bridger. She will become Luke Skywalker. Because to me, it's just an observation of one fan. The greatness of Star Wars and all storytelling comes when you take a complex concept, a complex idea, and you distill it to a one small tiny chunk here, and you just present, boom, like this, in one character. And this war surrounds her, and all these characters sound, I couldn't believe it, man.
Yeah, that's the thing, like your reaction right now is moving me, because like I love that a Star Wars fan has that reaction to Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I saw that, and I thought, are you kidding me? This is how they're doing it. Like I saw Wayland, and I was like, okay, potential. But then come back for season 2, where maybe we'll touch on this, maybe we won't, just like we might have done. Like there were so many interesting plot points they could have done in season 1. Right? Destroying Tapoka City, I felt like was unnecessary, because there were still some stories they could have told there. But I can appreciate the fact that they did. They had serious balls to do that. We might have to do a podcast someday about that concept of destroying something beloved, because originally the plan for The Force Awakens was to destroy Coruscant. So I'm sure we can have a very interesting discussion about our beliefs on that. But like, I had more emotion hearing you talk about your emotions about watching it than I had watching it. Which hopefully means that going in with an open mind for a second rewatch, or my first rewatch, I'll be able to appreciate it more. But for me, when I saw Wayland, I was like, okay, there's so much potential here, but I have so little faith in them, because Dave Filoni, I believe, oversaw it, but he didn't write it. It was written by someone who I think he trained during Rebels, but a lot of that show he didn't really touch. And I could tell, because there were so many. Dave Filoni, I'm not a big fan of him, but if there's one thing I give him credit for, he is a master of foreshadowing and giving. Eventually, there's a huge payoff, right?
Yeah.
In the Bad Batch, I personally felt like, and of course you're going to have a different opinion because you absolutely love the show. There probably was more emotional payoff for you immediately from watching the episodes. I think that I absolutely adore how they. I will give the opening episode a 9 out of 10, and that happens to be the one that Dave Filoni helped on. That had so much immediate payoff, but it teased so much about the future of the series and what could be. And then the future episodes, every single one of them, hey, here's Cutler Crane. You guys are happy to see that, right? Well, guess what? There's a huge piece of information. You're not going to find out about it during the entire season 1. Hey, look at this. We're going to the planet from Fallen Order. Oh, there's a mysterious guy under a mosque. Is that Cal Kestis? Well, we're going to confirm on our website that no, it's not. So any fan theory you could ever have just gets crushed. You know, they had so much interesting stuff there, but they consistently just crushed. And
I get the frustrating part, definitely. I absolutely
blew up with the Rancor episode, because we assumed that was the Rancor in episode 6. Oh my God, it's finally paying off. The emotional payoff is happening. They're connecting everything together. Turns
but do
out,
you think partially it's also fan expectations or not? That we set ourselves up for it?
Here's the thing. Yes, to an extent, we always go into something with some kind of expectations. However, I'm a fan of Dave Filoni as a writer and as a storyteller, but not as a producer. And when I heard, so my understanding was wrong. I went watching the entire show, believing that he was producing the whole thing. It turns out it was only, I think it was the first and last episode, I think. So I went into the belief that he's going to butcher this. Anytime he gets complete control over everything, he does something wrong. And I just want to be ready to hate it, because I would rather go in with no expectations.
So preconceived notions.
Yeah, exactly. So I would rather go in expecting the worst, so that if something really good happens, I will love it forever. That's what I did with Rebels, because I was kind of jaded from Clone Wars. I didn't like some of the things he did.
Mhm.
Absolutely love Rebels. I was like, okay, this is the way to go. Loved the first episode, and everyone after that disappointed me, because even though there was a lot of cool stuff, like I absolutely adore Omega. I love her accent, like Rika and Tick, and it's so cute. But she doesn't have any payoff. Like, she has the really emotional moment connecting to Crosshair in the finale, and he just stands there and lets them leave and then come back for season 2. Like, I'm so happy that you have that emotional payoff, but I'm still waiting for it. I'm sitting here.
You know what's funny, Mike? I could attribute myself, talking about myself strictly here, to a lot of my jaded experience with prequels was that I was superimposing my belief systems and my expectations on what it needed to be. Remember how I told you living with the bubble of original trilogy? And then when you crush that perception with something entirely different that feels to you distant, the whole Obi-Wan Kenobi, who Anakin is supposed to be, owning their droids, all that jazz, right? So the moment that I stopped kind of like logically trivializing and explaining myself why I hate something, and you remember how Bruce Lee says, like, be water, my friend. It became a little bit more, to me personally, it came with age. I don't know how it is with other people. Some people never change their perspectives. I'm not as rigid. I'm fluid. That's why I changed my opinion about prequels, to a degree, of course. And Dave Filoni or not, I judge stories based on the merit. Like, I surface level said, like I mentioned, like name drop was there. Oh, it's Dave Filoni. I'm kind of there. That's what satisfied my little fantasy of what the show is going to be. But at the end of it, what I judged and enjoyed was the end result, regardless of who did it, right? And to me, it's just something. It's a thought for food for the mind. The moment when you start like angling, looking at something from different angles, this one needs to be in this and that. Because I see the first season of The Bad Batch as a foundation, as layering the groundwork. I can easily see people watching the first season of The Clone Wars, which I hear a lot, by the way, and they're saying, well, yeah, kind of the first 3 seasons are kind of slow, but you're going to get into it. That's how they advertise it to other fans on Facebook. Yeah, the first 3 seasons are kind of slow, but still watch and don't miss out on it. And then when the shit picks up and it gets really good. Same here. It's because I'm 40 now. I'm a grandpa, the boomer of Star Wars. Like, oh, okay, all right, Dave. Oh, that's what it's. By the way, like, it also took a while for me to get into the Clone Wars. I loved it from the first episode, but it didn't quite hit the mark until like season 2 or 3. Then you start going back and seeing the whole piece of it, the whole story. Same, my personal belief will happen with the Bad Batch. Mike, let's do our final closing thoughts. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I hope we'll do this again. To summarize, your final thoughts, everything we've talked about today.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. It has been an honor. I expected this to be a wonderful conversation, but it has been so much more. We've had philosophy talk. We've talked about the history of Star Wars, expectations, fandom. We've gone into a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me. I think we've had a very productive conversation. I think that we, whether immediately or slowly over time, the ideas that we've shared here may influence other fans or even each other and have a more positive outlook. Like, I've come out of this saying that I'm going to rewatch The Bad Batch. And I hope we can have more conversations like this, because in the space of an hour and a half, 2 hours, we've been able to have a very, with minimal preparation, we've been able to have a very detailed, in-depth look at what is Star Wars to us, what do we believe it can or can't or should or shouldn't be, and just sharing our thoughts on that. I think it's a very important thing to do.
Yeah, regardless what age groups we come from, regardless what our culture upbringing is, I think I would like for fans who are watching this to understand the sentiment that this whole fandom is better when we are at least appreciative of what angles people are coming from. We don't have to like everything, but at the same time, we don't have to trash everything we dislike. It's a nuanced conversation. We are complex beings. The way that we approach material and look at it, nobody is the wiser. Nobody is the genius or mastermind. Not even George Lucas, the creator himself. The story that he created for us became our sandbox. The reason that he became a success story, Star Wars became a success, is because of us, because of fans. Without somebody to fuel your franchise, to fuel your ideas. And yes, marketing is a part of it. All the toys, George Lucas was very smart, very adamant to advertise with the first movie. This is what made the whole thing. Remember that. Don't forget that. We are also a tool, a part of the Lego piece. We helped it happen. And when I hear vitriol on Twitter, like, no, we can just hate and trash and be completely expressive and freedom of speech, whatever we want to say, as long as we're not trashing people, all these Disney makers, all these Disney lovers, all these Disney shows. I'm like, no, what you're doing is repeating the same mistakes that we've lived through our generation, being jaded, being pissed, and being hateful of stuff. And believe me, it was not a good experience when stuff that you tried to enjoy yourself being shit on by other fans. It's not healthy. It is not harmless. It is not. It's not cool. That's the whole idea, is to sit you down, have a chat about this, and so we can come to a conclusion. Guys, please check out Star Wars Explored website. His YouTube channel. I'll drop all the links wherever you are. You'll give me all your links, and you will go in and check it out. Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked our conversation, please support this channel, like this video. Drop some comments below. Let us know what were some of the questions you had. What are some hot takes that me and Mike could tackle in our future podcasts? And we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.